So I'm going to spotlight you as people come in, just so you know.
Sounds good. I have to figure out this.
The like background.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it'll do for now. Welcome everyone. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. Becky, thank you for being here. Jonathan Glass, thanks for being here. Craig, thanks for being here. Hey, Jordana, how's Bend?
Great question. Hi, Jordana.
The unmute button. Bend is awesome. Hi, Katie.
Hi, honey.
Everyone.
I'm throwing a question in the chat. You can answer if you would like. And something to keep us going. We'll be getting started in a couple minutes here. Yeah, really excited for today. It's going to be a great panel. I have to figure out the adding of music to this period so that we can have a little background mellowness before we get started. But
Little sing along.
one unnamed Zoomer. We are live on Facebook as well. I'm going to show non-video participants so I know who is here.
Yeah, hi, sorry, Mr. Paul. Yes, this is sorry from Gary. No, sorry, Mr. Paul. Everyone ready here?
Gail, thank you for being here. And Ken and Leah, or Leah, sorry. I always have trouble with that pronunciation. I think we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Also, if you have questions for the panel, you can throw them in the chat. It's probably going to be informal, so eventually we'll probably be able to unmute as well. And we are grateful for everyone being here today. I'm going to wait just about one more minute, and then we will jump in. All right, so welcome. My name is Saul Corin. I am the Director of Donor Engagement and Philanthropy for the Middleman Jewish Community Center. And we are glad that you are all here today for this interesting and exciting Zoom. So at the JCC, we definitely had to pivot when it came time for when COVID came. You know, we are an in-person gym, or at least that's what we had been. And suddenly we had to learn how to take exercise classes online, how to take our programming online, and how to provide value for our members from afar. We are grateful that as of March 1st, the building is reopened. The fitness center is opened, both pools, both the warm water pool and our larger pool are bigger. Our physical training is live again. Racquetball and basketball reservations are available. Spring camp and day camp are filling up, and our soccer leagues are back. And for those of you who are not yet comfortable coming back into the building, we still have virtual classes online. Lenny, our arts and culture manager, is a wizard of online programming. So it's been a really successful year from afar. So we had to pivot, and we look forward to learning from the restaurants about their pivots. And with that, I'm going to introduce Jason Zidell, who is the president of the MJCC Board of Directors. And here you go.
All right, thanks, Saul, and thanks everybody for joining today. I'd like to thank our sponsors, our presenting sponsors, Congregation Neve Shalom, COVID-19 Outreach and Services. Thanks to our series sponsors, Richard Barker, Wealth Management Advisor for Merrill Lynch, Barry and Carla Benson, First Republic Bank, Gewurz Menashe, Portland State University, Jonathan Singer of Barg Singer PC, the Jerry and Helen Stern Grandchildren's Fund of OJCF, Stuart Gordon Strauss, Architect PC, and Turner Construction Company. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Uriel Kushner was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Uriel graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Western Culinary Institute in Portland. He has managed restaurants in both Chicago and Portland and opened Jam on Hawthorne in 2001. Ooh, I used to go to brunch there. He later became the Director of Culinary Services for Cedar Sinai Park. In 2015, he opened the first Dairy Hill ice cream location in the Hillsdale neighborhood in Southwest Portland, and currently owns and operates 3 locations in the greater Portland area. His wife, Jessica, has been a genetic counselor at OHSU for almost 20 years. They are PJA parents to a son and PJA alumni Abraham and daughter Hannah, currently in the 6th grade at PJA.
Yes, of course. All right, here we are. So as I introduce the rest of the panels, first, just a quick thank you to Saul for giving us an opportunity to tell our stories of what we've experienced over the last year. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Ezra Holbrook. Ezra is a Portland musician, music booker, and for the last 2 years, owner of the Alberta Street Pub. Born in Alaska, he spent 10 years in LA and moved to the Northwest in 1993. He was all-county in the Cal State Northridge Youth Symphony and has played with bands with varying degrees of success. Notable bands include the Decemberists, Dr. Theopolis, Little Sue, Jeremy Wilson, Red Ray Frazier, and more. He has spent the last 20 years professionally booking music programs for venues all over the Northwest. In the fall of 2018, he was offered the opportunity to buy the Alberta Street Pub. He had been their booking agent up to that point and had helped them come back from the brink of going out of business. Became the 50% owner in April of 2019. When the pandemic hit, he was already in a battle for the business with his then partner, which became even more intense as we made it through COVID. He eventually negotiated a good deal for all parties and brought on a new team of partners, including Red Ray Frazier, local musician, Angelo Marcanatonatos, local bar owner. How'd I do?
Pretty good.
And Matthew Garboden, local CPA and small business owner. With a change of partnership behind him, he is now focused on attempting to understand and navigate what being a music venue looks like during and post-COVID. And then we are also fortunate enough to have Kati Reardon as part of the panel today. And Kati wears many hats, from the co-founder of the Nightwood Society to her current role as COO of Burgerville. She is focused on merging purpose, community, and business together to achieve more exponential results and long-lasting societal and environmental changes. Over the course of her 20-year career, Kati has developed a deep experience as an innovative and resident leader working for brands like Banana Republic, Nike, and now Burgerville. working across product design, management, supply chain, and strategy. Alongside her corporate experience, she simultaneously co-founded the Nightwood Society alongside her partner, Michelle Batista. Together, they have built a women-owned and ran an event space and creative strategy consultancy. The Nightwood Society highlights the role of women in food, and the team has created a space where all are welcome to break bread and explore uniquely curated events that highlight our local chefs and producers. She's a lover of travel, and of course her pub Spud, and all things outdoors. The Pacific Northwest has always been her home. Born and raised here in Portland, she is a third-generation Oregonian working toward our region leading the way in a more sustainable and regenerative business and food system practices. Got a lot going on, Katie. So,
I will, as a follow-up to that, I will say, because we're talking about roles in the Jewish community and Jordana's on the line, the JCC has been a major part of my life and upbringing in Portland. And Jordana and I grew up together and went to BB camp multiple years in a row. So I love having family on the line as well. And Leah Scaife, who is also here as a part of our Nightwood Society and Cooper's Hall venture, which we'll talk a little bit about, could not do any of that without her. So just wanted to give a shout out to the two ladies that are joining us today.
that's excellent. So we're going to get started with some questions that were brought to us already. And then, so we'll just get right into it. The first question that we were faced with was, tell us your story of how your business survived COVID-19. What pivots or changes did you make to keep your business going? I'll lead off and just say, at first, we could probably spend the hour plus just on this question. So I think that we'll kind of get into it, and there's a lot of topics we want to cover. But just know that the answer might not be totally complete. But what struck me about this question was how it's phrased when initially when it says, tell us the story of how your business survived ED. We're still surviving. COVID's not over, and I'm glad that things are reopening and things are able to happen with the right precautions in place. But at the same time, I was taken aback in terms of how it was phrased, because I think TBD on actually to what degree people are surviving. I think that's still in process. For me personally, I lost one location due to COVID, so that's not really surviving. I had a location in downtown Portland. And, over the last year, I don't know if it could be attributed completely to COVID on its own, but with everything else that's going on, from smoke, ice storms, civil unrest, you name it, in a time of COVID, I think these things get kind of amplified and make it harder to a little more challenging to navigate during that time. The location that I decided to close, or that my corporate landlords decided to close for me or make the decision for me, is in downtown. And so that was, that has its own challenges. In terms of pivots that we've made, online ordering has been huge for us. But what's really worked best is the online ordering that's been generated directly from us. The delivery services, I'm not a big fan of in terms of that pivot. I don't think that they really have the business partner's best interests in mind. But for us, doing direct online ordering through our own website has been a huge pivot, something that we kind of always wanted to do. And then the situations over the last year kind of pushed us to do it. And that certainly made a big difference in a positive way. We've also reduced our hours. We've reduced our offerings, which we're beginning now to go back to, pre-pandemic menu and hours as well. We're just kind of getting into that. So those are, some initial reactions to that question. I don't know, Ezra, what you'd like to add for that one?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I completely agree with you. I mean, none of us know if we're gonna make it through this or not. It certainly looks way better to me than it did in, last fall. Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, from like a nuts and bolts kind of angle in terms of, we serve food just like you, and having to change our menu so that we're not dealing with the amount of possible perishable stuff that we used to know that we would be able to go through, because it's really unpredictable now what, your business is going to do from day to day. So we've had to kind of change our whole strategy in terms of, from how much lettuce we order to how many kegs we have on hand, because we're like, every time we shut down, we had to throw so much stuff away, or at least try to save as much as we could. But, every time that happened, businesses lost thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and it just kills you every time. So now, that was part of the whole learning curve. And I know we'll address a question later, like, what would you have done differently? And definitely the first few times we learned a pretty hard lesson about, how to order and how to like be much more nimble. But I do agree that I think, we've been lucky enough to get, we got some help from various sources. We got a grant from the Oregon Cultural Trust because we're a music venue. And we were trying, we have been trying to actually put musicians back to work. We built a stage on our patio. We've been doing outdoor shows and trying to get as many people, some money as we can. But we still don't know what's going to happen, and we're basically surviving on those things like PPP and grants right now.
And Katie, what are your feelings about this question?
Ooh, well, there's a lot in it. So to your point earlier on, I wear many hats. From a Nightwood standpoint, our core being is so rooted in community. And one of the things that we've realized, and I think you mentioned it also, is community can be both in fun and in business. And one of the pieces that we've seen this year from a Nightwood standpoint was we actually really early on realized events, similarly to you, Ezra, like events weren't coming back, right? And they still haven't come back. And people then tend to push their call it investments into the future. And that could be a future in 21, might be 22, might be 23. So to your point, from a managing of business and expectation, right, of how much money you're going to make, what your staff looks like, ordering all of that, it's really very challenging to forecast demand. Yep. So for us, and we'll talk about it a little bit, what we've done to pivot our entire business, we really started to work in a more spirited way around community. How could we partner with other like-minded businesses in our community to lift all boats? How could we start to leverage our competencies and our teams and our financial investments, and who were we in business with that still, we thought would probably be in business coming out of this, and how could we, again, leverage a broader audience and team? So that's helped us a ton. From a Nightwood standpoint, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for our future. From a Burgerville standpoint, it's been a crazy ride. Also community built organization. We, from the very beginning, had no idea what this was even going to look like and whether or not we'd still honestly be able to keep our doors open, whether it was a dining room, a drive-through, etc. One thing that, to your point, to your point, Ezra, earlier on keeping everything opening and just like, okay, where are we going? What kind of expectations? What does funding look like? When you're in a 40 location business, you have a ton of vendor relationships. Those vendors all need to be paid, right? And they all have supply chains, and they all have downstream payments to make as well. So that system for us is a really dimensional one, that it wasn't just about Burgerville survival, it was about all of that system surviving and the financial impact in our entire region of the Pacific Northwest, because we're in Oregon and Washington. So we had that top of mind of like, we cannot go under, because the impact, and at the time we had 1,500 employees and all of these vendor partners and suppliers that we were, their key partner for, especially as restaurants started closing and those vendors didn't have places to sell their goods anymore. So yeah, I mean, the COVID-19 one was the kickoff, the tipping point. And I think you spoke to it earlier as well, around this idea of then we had fires and then we had snowstorms. Each one of those, for a business in the events business or in the burgers, fries, and shakes business, are very, very impactful events to recover from. And each of those was 4 to 5 days. So not only did you have COVID, but you had these major business disruptions along the way that none of us forecasted and planned for. So it was like, boom, boom, boom. I don't think I've slept in a year. Just going to say that as a result.
Mhm.
Yeah, when we talk about also the pivots or changes that we made in the past year, one challenge has been kind of anticipating the attitudes of the customers themselves.
Yeah.
You have a segment of the population that is looking to have an experience that closely mirrors a pre-pandemic experience. And then you simultaneously have customers that want as safe and germ-free experience as they can possibly have. And catering to those two groups simultaneously is incredibly challenging. And I will just say that at the very beginning of it all, I had it, I'm just a little Pishki ice cream shop in Hillsdale, and I got people throwing things at me and yelling at me, all because I'm asking them to wear a mask. Now, thankfully, that has, I'd say, reduced greatly over the past 6 months, and we haven't had that. But initially, it was scary for a 16-year-old employee to be scooping ice cream and having somebody, 3-4 times their age yelling at them. It just seemed ridiculous. Like, really, this is what you're upset about during a pandemic? So that part has been really challenging to simultaneously take care of both of those groups. So the pivots that we've made, sometimes they're almost in conflict with each other, because we'll be offering curbside pickup for one group and allowing another group to actually come inside the shop and place their order. So it's been a little tricky. We manipulated our menu to try to enhance the at-home experience for the customer, with the kind of the takeout model, bring it home and enjoy. But what we found was that's although that would be the safest, that's not what people really wanted. They just wanted to come and have an ice cream cone and stand out in the parking lot and do it. Yeah. So so like I say, it's very it's challenging, and I'm sure it's just as challenging for the other businesses. I can't imagine going to an outdoor music venue but having to keep so far from the music and so far from the people I'm enjoying it with and all of that. So it's really this kind of ongoing conflict of interest between making your customers happy and doing what you feel you need to do to keep them safe, and just as, if not more importantly, keeping your employees safe is incredibly challenging. And that really leads to the next question very well, as far as the most difficult change in your business. And so everything I just said contributes to that. And then also understanding that, we're so focused on the customer experience. Our employees are going through a heck of a time over the last year, from fear to trying to understand what's best for them individually, but at the same time trying to be committed to their jobs and their employment. That's been incredibly difficult to manage. Kind of the human aspect to the employee and what they've experienced has been a very difficult change that we've experienced and continue to manage as this crisis continues. It might feel like it's lessening, but the crisis is certainly continuing. I don't know if you guys want to talk about also some specific changes that you've made, Ezra?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously we had to come up with an entirely new model of how to do this, because, with any of the COVID restrictions, it sort of eliminated the way you would normally put on a live show to begin with. And although we are a bar and restaurant, we are a live music venue, and we learned the hard way. We tried to reopen briefly in June, and no one was ready to play shows yet. And it was a complete disaster. No one came. We lost a ton of money. So it's like, okay, we can't do this until we can figure out how to start to bring live music back. That's where we get our business from. I think that from the nuts and bolts aspect, we had to reimagine the entire way we did it. So we started, we tore out part of our patio. We put an outdoor stage out there. We came up with this concept of basically selling seats by the table. So we're like, we have to keep people in one group. We have to keep them 6 feet apart from the next group. so we can't just sell individual tickets like we used to, because people could sit wherever they want. They could stand next to whoever they wanted. And that was difficult. A lot of people, we literally got people putting on Yelp reviews that we don't like single people because tickets or tables are not one dimensional and you can sell at least 2 seats to them. So trying to kind of get that across to people that we were doing it for safety and, trying to reimagine this whole thing. So a lot of it, figuring all of that out was one aspect of this. But honestly, I think the most difficult part was not only from an employee standpoint, but from our standpoint, was more of the psychological questions of like, are we doing the right thing? Because you really are, like you said, you're balancing the needs of the community in one sense versus the needs of a community in another sense. And you're like, there's the safety component, which is absolutely real, but there's also, the psychological and emotional need for people to reconnect again. And also there's the just bread and butter facts. Like, we have 15 bartenders that are broke. Half of them never got unemployment. We have, no band member gets unemployment. So you have an entire music community that's literally like essentially asking their landlord if they can just live there for free until this is over, So, but that's, we constantly questioned every time we were like, should we reopen? Do we stay closed? What's really the best thing to do here? I think that's been the hardest part, because we still are second guessing ourselves. We're like, are we putting people at risk by doing this? Like, are we being as safe as possible? Is the good outweighing the bad? And that's exhausting, to be honest. And I think our employees feel the same way. The bands feel the same way. And we're all trying to be like, is this the, the right direction to go? And there kind of isn't really a right answer. So it's just kind of a constant struggle that you just have to be willing to sort of live with the stress of that, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. What you just said resonates for me so much. There is no map. Like, we are all creating, every single individual is creating their own map, whether they're a business owner or an employee. And that's been the part of like, okay, well, I've got an idea, I'm going to run with it. Risk, reward, don't know until you're deep in it. So I totally appreciate what you're saying, because I felt that way a little bit, like compassless. And, for me, with both of our businesses, and I'll speak a little bit to the Nightwood and Burgerville, but purpose is at the forefront of both of those businesses. And when you start to, our filters have been purpose and our mission. If our mission was starting to be compromised, we knew we couldn't do it. So ultimately, from a Nightwood standpoint, some of the things that were the most difficult changes were really immediate. We had to let our team go. Our founding team, we're lady owned and ran, right? We have a female chef. Like, we have come up together for 3 years, building a business together, and then have that evaporate overnight is like letting your family go. And we're a small, tiny team. So that was, and we flex during the, event cycle, but for the heart and soul of the Nightwood, that immediacy was like, it happened overnight. And one of the things that we realized in that process was, again, we're mission and purpose driven. And we knew really quickly, we couldn't wait. So we really went after a more proactive thinking, to your point on not having a map or a guide, and started to play around with our business model. So for us, we knew we didn't have any income. We have amazing landlords. The Robert Sachs and his team are our landlords, and I cannot give them enough props. Everywhere I go, they have been just phenomenal people to work with. And we put together a plan with them, as well as with the owners of Cooper's Hall. And Cooper's Hall, for those that do or don't know, is also both a tap room / restaurant, as well as an event space. And for the combination of things, we came together and started having conversations about, hey, what would it look like to merge our teams? What would it look like to create a joint venture? Would that be something that we could step into and start trying on, so that we could maintain employment for the core group, still be selling events, and try other kind of experiential opportunities, both with Cooper's Hall and Nightwood brands together? So that was arguably the most difficult change, but also the most innovative one we had. And it's proven to work for us so far. And we're really excited about what that's going to tell us and show us into the future. So we started doing, curated marketplaces and bringing more of our community in. And when they were selling wine, we were selling merch. And, so really just getting creative with new business partners and trying to lift all boats. That proved and is still proving like a vehicle that we can carry into the future. Who knows? To your point, we are definitely not out of this thing. And in the event space, people are starting to come back, right? I think this spring, they're starting to be like, oh, maybe I can have that small family gathering, or maybe I can get married next summer, et cetera. So that's been really helping to have a collective team approach to building that momentum. From a Burgerville standpoint, I mean, the greatest impact to our business was our employees. We, right out of the gate, you know, call it March, April, May, we had to go into a reduction of force of almost 600 people. That does not come lightly. As the person having to work through that, that is something, again, haven't slept in a year as a result of that. And one of the things that we realized really quickly was not only did we have to manage the operating model, how we were going to serve food, what PPE looked like, how do you do that with less talent, how do you afford that, with also guest expectation, to what you were speaking to earlier. And in the beginning, what was interesting is we took a position really quickly out of the gate around PPE. We started wearing masks pre-mandate. And most of that was because, one, we had seen, in my career, I've had the blessings to travel a lot in Asia. So wearing a mask for me was quite comfortable in terms of the thinking behind the science at the time. So we put that into play really quickly. But one of the things that I realized in that process was, yes, it was about the guest interaction, but convincing your employees to also do that and wear that all day long is also a really big challenge. It's uncomfortable. It's challenging in a high heat, high stress work environment, right? It's creating 6 feet apart in a fast food location is near impossible. So having to get really creative about people and their stationing and moving throughout the restaurant was something we had to get after as well. But arguably the most difficult change in our business at Burgerville was the impact and reduction in force. And none of us could see what the demand was going to look like. Now as we're coming into the spring of 21 and summer of 21, which is our high season, we need to go back into hiring. And one of the things we're seeing challenges in is access to talent. Mm-hmm. You know, we will hire back about 8% of our total workforce going into our summer months. And we're finding that workforce is not available. So that's a really interesting piece that we didn't plan for in the beginning, but is now the repercussions of having to go into a reduction in force in the spring of last year, and now a rehiring of employees now.
What do you attribute to to that? Like why are they not available?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of it is the policies in feedback that we've gotten. Some of it is the policies and access to unemployment. Some of that is also, we have new competitors in the region. So we've got some heat coming from In-N-Out and Shake Shack, et cetera, which is always good competition. I love. And then some of it, honestly, is a wait and see. A lot of our employees, especially in the younger ranks, right? I mean, we're both a summertime job as well as a career path, depending upon how you come to Burgerville. And for the younger folks, a lot of them are looking at this as, I'm going to wait and see how all of this is going to shake out. And what it means to go back to school, what it means to go back to university for those that do. Like, it's a whole mixture of things that we're receiving feedback on. From a Nightwood standpoint, what's been interesting is, you know, when our team disbanded and went looking for new roles and new opportunities, it's really hard to rehire the talent that's going to further your total, that really believes in the mission and vision of what you're doing. So we're going through now with the Cooper's Hall and Nightwood mixture. And I think those businesses will be okay because there's so much amazing talent in town from a, call it chef and service standpoint. But in the fast food game, it's a competition for wages, hours, and this wait and see around what's to come with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to the topic of difficult change, for Dairy Hill, community engagement is essential. It's what we're all about. I mean, the ice cream is just a vehicle to get us involved into the community. And so reframing how we connect with the community has been a difficult challenge, one that we've been able to do in different ways. Mostly, I would say the biggest way that we've been doing it is by doing fundraising and by partnering with different groups in town and doing online fundraising campaigns, because it allows even within that one group let's say I'm doing fundraising for a school, it allows the families to still stay connected. We've had a couple of schools where we've done like movie and ice cream night, where we encourage them all to rent or download or whatever they do nowadays, the same movie, and all have like family Sunday kits. So everybody watched, Madagascar, and they all had ice cream sundaes in their PJs. And so, getting creative that way of, they might be at-home experiences, but there's still the opportunity for people to connect through them. And so we found that, incredibly valuable. And at the same time, it's frustrating. Little leagues are a big deal for us. They're huge for us, softball leagues and little leagues and things like that. And on the one hand, we want to be involved, we want to support and raise money for the little leagues. And sometimes I have to take my own personal feelings and check them at the door as far as like, is it really safe for a bunch of 11-year-olds semi-masked to be running around together outside? Maybe so, maybe not. So it's just hard to, it's hard to you try to, reserve your judgment, I'll just say. And that's been a difficult challenge as well. Certainly we've all gotten different levels of help, both from, our own communities and through the government. One of the questions that was submitted was, did any of us apply for PPP funding? I think we can keep this one kind of brief. Yes, for me is the answer. I got some funding, but I said to my wife, it's kind of like taking a single Tylenol for a migraine. It helped us out for about 6 weeks. I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth. I'm really grateful that it existed. It was a nice little Band-Aid. But the truth of the matter is, what allows us to survive are not forgivable grants or loans, but are not forgivable grants. They're loans, and loans that we never intended to take. So, so on the one hand, it's nice to be able to have access to something like an EIDL loan, which is absolutely the reason why I was able to stay open for as much time as I've been open. We were only closed for about 10 weeks, fires and ice not included. But this is now it's like a new mortgage that I have that I never intended to have. So there's this public perception that we're getting all this free money and this forgivable loans and what's the big deal and which I hear from customers. And the reality is that I've had to, like I say, take on more debt in order to survive. I don't know what you guys have to say about any kind of financing or PPP specifically, Ezra.
So we applied for the first round of PPP and got some help. Just like you said, it was, it helped us. We got, enough to float for a few months when we were closed. We tried to keep our employees as best we could. So we were basically like working out a situation where we could pay them something, but they could still get their unemployment. And because we really didn't want people to lose their jobs entirely, or, we were really trying to make sure we were taking care of everybody as best we could. We were, really lucky in the fall. We did get an OCT grant, which is the Oregon Cultural Trust, because we're a music venue, and that was what actually allowed us to reopen. So we reopened briefly in November. We were doing live music outside. It was going well, but then this freeze happened. So we were shut down again. And as we all know, at the time they were saying at least 2 weeks for Multnomah County. They sort of changed after a couple of days, but we were like, it's the second time we'd been sort of suddenly shut down, and we were just like, let's wait until after the holidays are over, because we just anticipated that, this was probably going to keep happening. So we didn't reopen again until basically the end of January, when we're open now. But that grant was basically what allowed us to do that. And then we just applied for the second round of PPP, and we did get it. And again, so, I'm really hoping that, those loans are forgivable. We weren't even allowed to apply for our first round of forgiveness yet, but we did everything super by the books. Basically we used it pretty much straight for payroll. So I'm hoping that, those loans will be forgiven. If they're not, we're gonna have to deal with that. And that puts us in a horrible position if they aren't forgiven. But at this point, we're just like crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, but we wouldn't have lived if we didn't take them. So we really didn't have a choice.
It's difficult to accept money without knowing the final terms. You know, and that's where we're all so vulnerable right now. And that part has just been very hard to negotiate. It's like, oh, it's a low interest loan. What's the harm? Just take the money, take the money. You know, you can only say that so many times.
Right.
And then are you throwing, good money after bad? You just don't know. So so that part's been very challenging. I'm sure Nightwood had experienced a lot with this.
Yeah, we did. We did take PPP early on in the process and focused it on salary and honestly on health benefits. We really, again, going kind of back to mission and purpose, we're in the early stages of this, so unknown about what the health implications were going to be for our employees. And so that was the piece where we're like, okay, we have to be able to maintain health insurance as long as possible. We may not be able to pay everybody at the same rate, but we've got to make sure that we can extend that for at least X amount of time. So we really focused on, to your point, putting it back into payroll, as well as making sure that we could create a buffer around health insurance. For us, we contemplated, we didn't start our business with heavy debt. And that was a strategic focus for us, because we didn't know what to expect 3.5 years ago being in the events business anyway. So the idea of getting to a place of absolute basically disparity and then taking on all this debt at that point, we had to really reevaluate, are we willing to do that, or are we willing to close the doors? How much risk as the owners, right, are you willing to take? Because eventually it's a pass through. So one of the things Michelle and I and Leah aligned on really early in the process was we were going to explore other ways of making our business work and getting it covered before we were going to be willing to bury ourselves in debt. And that was, not everybody has that choice, but we had to make that call, because if we didn't align on that in the beginning, once you get into the emotion of it, and you're in the decision making, there's a paralysis. For me, there was a paralysis that would take over. And I was like, no, we got to stay proactive. We got to stay proactive. So it was as much of a sensibility about what risk we weren't willing to assume, as much as it was about what do we need to take to get us through the immediate right now. The other part of the Nightwood story for us that has, again, I go to, and not everybody had this, this relationship with your landlord. Our landlord team gave us forbearance like I would never have imagined. And that is actually what has helped us survive. The PPP was small, right? It was basically enough payroll to cover a month plus. And that was back in April. It was the relationship with our landlord and their expectations of when we would be out of this as an event space that actually set us up so that we had choice.
That's great, Katie. And that's actually the perfect segue into the next question. Because it's, can you share a story about something unexpected that happened, or something that went better than you anticipated? And for me, better than anticipated for two of my locations was the landlord relationship and what they were willing to do, and what they, basically what they were willing to do to help us survive, and whether it was loan forgiveness for a few months, being able to push things off. Some landlord, one of the landlords was very creative and was just like, we'll extend the duration of the lease at the end and just give you a chunk of free months right now. Great, love it. That helped get us through winter. And other landlords were just willing to be flexible. For me personally, the landlords that I have a face-to-face relationship with, a true human relationship with, were absolutely amazing. The corporation that owns the mall downtown, awful. Couldn't have been worse in terms of how they handled the situation and basically forced my hand to close that location. So both were unexpected, but I'd say the landlords that I have that are based here in Portland and are real people, the way they rose to the occasion was truly wonderful and much better than I ever would have anticipated. Ezra, I don't know if you've had any experiences that, not landlord specific, but just something that went better than you actually expected recently.
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, actually, I'm friends with my landlord. I've known him for 20 years, and so he's been amazing through this whole thing. And it essentially was just like, I don't want you to go out of business. Just tell me what you need, and we'll make it happen. And So I got very lucky as well. And again, if that hadn't happened, I doubt we would be having this conversation right now.
Right.
I actually think that the really interesting thing that has gone way better than I expected, frankly, is how much business we're doing right now, even with all of the restrictions. And that I really think, I mean, I don't know if it's sustainable. I'm looking at it as the community's willingness to and desire to help local businesses survive. But, you know, it's interesting because there's this huge conversation with music venues right now about that, you know, it's not worth it to open unless you're at 100% capacity. And I totally get that. And for a lot of places that do have huge overheads, I completely understand. But I think that what's getting lost in the conversation, because most of those places haven't tried to reopen, is what we're seeing is we're actually having nights where we're making pre-COVID money with a quarter of the people in our building. And I think part of that is maybe because like I'm reevaluating like how many people we should let in there in the future. Like maybe people have a better experience and stay longer if there's shorter lines and better service. And like, you know, because we used to just pack them in.
Have you adjusted pricing? Have you adjusted pricing to
No,
kind of?
we actually adjusted down. So because we were like, everyone's going to be broke, we took $1 off all our pints. We were like, let's try to keep things like, but the average, I mean, we have a very basic POS system, but it tracks our average tab. And pre-COVID, our average tab was like $17. And since we've been reopened, it's like almost 30. And tips are like 26%.
Yeah.
We're thirsty.
Yeah. And also like, you know, the because of our model that we came up with how to do shows, especially because, you know, part of the reason we're doing this is like, you know, musicians are really struggling right now. Like they haven't had a job in a year, and most of them don't have any sort of help or, you know, unemployment, anything like that. So we wanted to make sure we're like, let's make sure everybody gets paid. We're like, you know, so a lot of our shows are charging, you know, at least $10 a seat, but that's a $40 four top. If you have to buy it by the table, so, you know, you're dropping $40 and hoping that you can get 3 friends that want to chip in or whatever, or you're just eating it. And we were really, we were very skeptical about how that was going to go. And I mean, you know, we just had Taylor Kingman played on Saturday night and he sold his tickets for $60 a seat. And we sold out in like an hour. And also that people are just dumping 20s into his tip jar. So we're seeing this like really interesting engagement from the community that we were not expecting at all. And, you know, I'm sort of looking at it, and this is something that I think we're going to touch upon sort of moving forward in like but we're already kind of reevaluating. We're like, you know, maybe this is also an opportunity for us to sort of revalue what we bring to the community. And it seems like the community right now has revalued it. And they're sort of bringing that conversation to our front door. And we're like, hey, people, like they suddenly seem to be, relating to things like live music and good food and a pint of beer or a cocktail that someone actually made for them in an entirely different way than they were a year ago. And I'm kind of excited about like, if this is something that we can actually culturally sort of shift, it might really change the conversation for us down the road. So that's what's really shocked us, frankly. You know, we assumed we'd still be losing tens of thousands of dollars a month and just trying to just not go out of business. And we've actually been sort of stringing along some fairly decent weeks. So it's been a big surprise in a great way.
That's great. Katie, was there anything you wanted to add to this one?
Sure. Well, first of all, it sounds like I need to come to the Alberta Street Pub, because had I known all of that, I'd be knocking at your door regularly. So I will be there. Oh, Lee, I see you in the chat. She went.
I was probably there.
Love that. I couldn't agree more. Just this, I mean, truly, and you read about it everywhere, this idea of what innovation looks like right now. And as a person who has had the opportunity to build a career in really innovative companies, if you have that spirit and you are willing to literally go on the adventure, you can figure out new ways of doing things. And in addition to that, I think the guest experience, their expectations are all over the board. If it's curated in a way that piques their curiosity and adds value, they will pay for it. And that's what we're seeing as well. You know, from a Nightwood standpoint, the Cooper's Hall Nightwood JV was one of the things that was the unexpected, but it's proved to be a really beautiful community built, joint venture. So that's been super exciting. One of the things at the Nightwood that we value and pride ourselves on is we're a little political. We have a voice and we like to use it. So we actually, when our space was sitting empty and yet we're paying overhead on it, right? You're paying the utilities, you're keeping the lights on, refrigeration, et cetera. We brought in other community organizations to leverage our space. So as an example, especially starting back last spring until this, currently, as the community and the conversation around Black Lives Matter started, as well as the BIPOC community getting more, I would say, exposure, we partnered with an organization called Equitable Giving Circle, which I highly, I'm going to put in a plug. Everybody check them out. They're doing amazing work. And they are really a grassroots Portland-based organization serving the BIPOC community, especially in the food space. They do a ton of, prepackaged boxes and grocery delivery, perishables into the BIPOC community who has been for sure impacted by COVID, as well as by the significant job losses across the community. So what we started to do was to say, okay, well, if we can't be here and we can't make money, how can we leverage it as a community space for others? So EGC moved in and they've been able to run their business from our space, which has been amazing. We started to do some other political campaigns around the election, which then started to create a new momentum for the Nightwood and what we want to do into the future. So that was really unexpected, but a really great energy giver, both for the teams as well as the joint venture, as well as community organizations using our space. From a Burgerville standpoint, ours was technology. We closed every so we kept drive-through open in 40 locations, but we closed dining rooms in 40 locations. How do you make up a huge portion of your business when that's your new operating model? At the beginning of COVID, our digital business, so you spoke to this earlier, our digital business was like 2%, right? Like you could find us on our company's in the middle of a full brand overhaul. And that's what we had planned to do in 2021. Oh, by the way, COVID starts, brand overhaul is like the last thing on your mind when you're just trying to survive. But the investments around digital were major for us because since our dining rooms closed, drive-thrus could be lines around the block, right? Which then impacts other businesses and customer experience, all of that. So we hustled after new technology. And now our digital business, our app's been updated. We have much more of a service around digital. We're still learning. But in a year, we've managed to grow our business to about 15% of our total. We knew we wanted to make those investments, but they weren't prioritized in the way going into 2020 and 21 that they are now. So I would say that shift of shed your old plan, rewrite a new one, make those investments and go has been a real cultural shift for us as a total organization.
Excellent. Well, for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of merge a few of the remaining questions and really, we've been talking about pivoting this whole time, but we're going to pivot now to, I'd say, more of a focus on the future rather than what, how we were even able to make it to this point. So, and I'm just rattle off the questions and then I ask you to kind of maybe break it down into like 3 parts. So the first part would be, looking back, what would you do differently? So that's kind of where we're going to leave the past behind us at answering that question. And then, where do you see your business in 6 months? And maybe in between answering, what you would have done differently and where you see yourself going. If you want to sprinkle into that answer also kind of what your vision is or where you think kind of Portland as a whole within the food and entertainment industry is headed as we emerge out of the current situation. I'll just as far as what I would do differently. That's once again real tough question because my knee-jerk reaction is I would have closed for winter. I'm an ice cream shop. Who am I trying to stay open in the midst of a pandemic in the winter? And then there's the first thing that leaps to my mind is my employees and hearing the struggles of people getting unemployment insurance. Was enough for me to just stay open and just do my best to break even to keep people employed. And so that didn't really, let me do it. And then the other was just the sacrificing the community connection. I mean, we even just being able to do birthday cakes for people throughout all of this, and just knowing that we're playing a small part in helping enhance a celebration during a pandemic is enough to hopefully keep us, endeared to the community itself. But it just allows us to kind of just to stay involved and just to, see these kids that we made a cake for them when they were 2 and 3, and now we're making cakes for them when they're 8 and 9, and now we're making cakes for them when they used to be 8 and 9, and now we're hiring them when they're 15, 16. So, keeping that flow going was more important than remaining profitable. And so with the help of the landlords, we were able to stay open. So it doesn't really directly answer what I would have done differently, but I was certainly tempted to do a lot of things differently, but resisted. The way that as far as the food scene in Portland, that's a difficult question for me to answer. Ice cream's a little bit different than being in the restaurant industry, although I was in restaurants for many years, and I think that there's some kind of correction that's going to occur. I mean, the strong will survive, and some of those, I think we needed to kind of tamp down our egos. I think the Portland, calling Portland a food mecca and kind of glamorizing the Portland food scene, I think, pandemic or no pandemic, I think that was getting a little out of control. But I think that as we emerge, from this, I think that it will rebound, but the names might be different and the faces might be different. And for many, that's just very unfortunate, and it's heartbreaking. For us, the question was phrased, what do I see, how do I see our business, over the next 6 months, or in 6 months from now? We're not changing a whole lot. We're really just trying to position ourselves and prime ourselves for just a tremendous 2022. And that's just the attitude that we're having moving forward. Hopefully take care of our people, take care of our customers, most importantly, take care of our employees, and just, hang on for the next, the rest of this year, and come through next winter, and just really looking forward to embracing the anticipated enthusiasm that we think the public will have once we can truly start having fun again. So that's where we are as we're both looking back and looking forward. So I pass it off to you, Ezra.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of agree with your sentiment as far as like what I would do differently. I mean, like I said, the first time we reopened, didn't go very well for us financially. And we at that point in June, we weren't having any live shows. Musicians were still like, yeah, no, we're not comfortable. That wasn't a thing that we were going to try to pull off. But also I do feel like, and I think you kind of said the same thing. I mean, everything that we did, we sort of had to do. For one good reason or another. I mean, whether it was, exactly like you said, like we had multiple employees who never got unemployment, even though they absolutely qualified for it. They just never got it. Like it never showed up. We had some employees that didn't get it for 6 months, and all of a sudden they got 6 months worth of checks. That actually happened to me. Because I took myself off payroll, went on unemployment, and, waited for, I think, 3 months before, and then I got like 10 checks in the mail. But so, our hands were sort of forced. Every change that happened, it was like, okay, well, now this is the reality we have to face. And I just felt like we just sort of did it. And, who knows, again, what the future holds. But I do feel like I don't think we could have done anything differently. I mean, we did the best we could, and we kept everybody as safe as possible. And we took as good a care of our employees as we could. And I don't think we had another choice. And that's kind of, yeah. So I guess I regret nothing. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, as far as, for us moving forward, in the next 6 months, I mean, basically, we are in a little bit of a weird situation just sort of geometrically, because our space is small to the point where we're already kind of past Multnomah County's regulations helping us at all in terms of capacity. So we're not really going to be able to change anything until social distancing really isn't an issue anymore. And I don't really expect that until, first, until basically everyone has an opportunity to be vaccinated. And then also however long it takes the public just to feel safe doing that again. And that's, who knows? It could be July, it could be July of next year. I don't pretend to know. So, our goal is to just sort of kind of try to stay afloat as best we can. I don't really expect us to start making huge moves, forward growth wise, because we really can't right now, just because of square footage. If tables have to be 6 feet apart, we're kind of stuck where we are. But also, frankly, in my business, again, the hours will help. Like when we go down to low risk, we can stay up until midnight. Little things like that are going to help us a bit. And we're also trying to expand. We used to open at 11 a.m. every day. We've stopped doing lunch during the week now, not just because we were, thinking probably correctly they would be too slow really to be worth it, but also, Katie, like you were talking about earlier, frankly, finding staff right now is hard. We lost a couple people when COVID started that moved back to be with family across the country or wherever. They're not coming back. Hiring, but like strangely enough, right now, like, look at Poach, there's a zillion ads for line cooks. And so that's going to be an interesting thing as far as like getting back to being able to fully staff. I also have noticed, as probably all three of you have too, but through all this, also trying to take better care of your employees in terms of like, we really looked at what we were paying people. We were like, in my business, we kind of have a pretty hard floor and ceiling, but also, especially because, we also were aware that our employees felt different levels of risk coming back to work. They were nervous about it. So we've also tried to kind of like give people bumps where we could to sort of help out and make them feel better and take a little better care of them. But that also means then you're sort of squeezing the amount of staff you can have. And so it's going to be interesting. 6 months, I don't know. I do think, I think I'm definitely an optimist. I think Portland's going to be fine. I moved here because I loved the scene that was here so much, between the live music scene and the bar scene and the restaurant scene. And, there's a bunch of really tough people here who own businesses. And I think a lot of them are going to make it. My only small concern, I'm just hoping that the holes that have been created by people who couldn't make it don't get filled by people who are coming from somewhere else and just taking advantage of open spaces. And, I really do hope that we still have an opportunity for local people to step up into those opportunities. We certainly, and Katie, I think you spoke, all three of you have spoken this too, because we all are also, and we're a community space. Our mission statement is very clear about, what we are trying to do in this community. And so we've also been talking about like, how can we right now partner up with other people who are looking for opportunities like that and see if we can help them get into those spaces or partner with us, or like if we, can do other things to sort of like help people get those opportunities. But I do think that Portland's going to be okay. And I think it's going to take some time. My bar manager and I have a running gag now where we're just like, we have opened and closed so many times that like all of us should just start a business where we just come in and help people close and open bars, because we've done it 4 or 5 times in the last 9 months. And we're pretty good at it now. So I know where to, put all the beef in the freezer. So, but yeah, anyways, that's my 2 cents.
I think Katie, just real quick in your answer, if you could also just include, if you know of dine-in plans for Burgerville as we move forward, when I think that some people are curious about that as well.
Yeah, great question. So, both of you have covered the gamut of what the future looks like. I totally agree. I think Portland has such amazing talent, and it's got passion, and it's got supply chain. So that right there sets us up to reinvent ourselves. I think what we will run into is we have a lot of folks who are going to probably use this as a way, as an opportunity, not a way, but an opportunity to reskill and retool for other careers. The food business, whether you're in the front of house or the back of house, can be a grind. And the pay hasn't always met the amount of time and energy it takes to be successful. So I actually think there's going to be a bit of a shrink in that talent pool with some people who may retool into other industries. But I'm with you. I think the talent and the passion in the supply chain in terms of local growers and producers sets us up to come back in a new way that none of us may see right now, which is really exciting. And I feel a lot of energy and momentum around that. You know, what would I do differently? And I'll just say this for both companies. Well, one, personally, I would sleep more. I did not take care of myself necessarily in the very beginning stages of this. And as a leader, I will just attest to every one of us, if you don't show up and you're rested in some capacity, right? Everybody, those phrases start to get really, they start showing. So that'd be a learning for me. But what I would say for both businesses is really this idea around not only getting creative, but you know, work with your, to your point, work with your community to identify different ways of operating. You know, from a Nightwood standpoint, I think some of the things that we've seen around going into a joint venture, which maybe before felt like competition, but now feels like, oh, we've got an even bigger family from which to create opportunity from. So that's a really interesting part of our story and narrative there. And I would see, you know, events are going to come back. People are always going to get married, right? Like, that stuff's it's all going to regenerate. It just is the when. But for both businesses, the piece that is critical now for both of them is really the reigniting, to your point earlier, around 2022. Not, you know, all of us became crisis managers. If you're running a business, you add crisis management to your resume. I was not an expert in that before that. And now we've gone through, you know, really arguably 4 different types of crisis, from societal change to COVID to fire to weather. And so I want to move out of crisis management back into future strategy. So that's where I'm spending a lot of time in both of those areas right now, between Nightwood and Cooper's Hall, as well as for Burgerville. What that means to answer the Burgerville question is, you know, we took a pretty strong position that in order to keep our employees safe first, we most likely will not open our restaurant dining rooms for the rest of the year. So we are going to tailor some different opportunities. We've got curbside, call it curbside delivery, organized right now. So you can drive up and text and we'll bring you your food. We've got some patios strategically placed throughout the Pacific Northwest, especially in our transportation corridors, because we know that more people will be traveling by car again this summer. So we're starting to get like, okay, if we're going to open and we serve outside, where can people sit and eat that's exterior of the building? And then really trying to move people through the experience of ordering at Burgerville, especially through drive-through, in a more fast and accurate way, is a key component to our survival, especially as we keep the dining rooms closed. I think when we start to see data come out in the fall around how many people are vaccinated or what our risk levels look like, then we'll reevaluate. But, you know, reopening a dining room is like reopening a new operating model. To your point on opening and closing, right? You have to forecast differently, hire differently, just all of the pieces. And so right now we're really going to keep our foot on the gas on the things that are working and focus on that.
It's great. You know, I just wanted to add one more thing about when we're talking about the future of the food, you know, industry here in Portland. My true wish is that as it reemerges, that it stays true to Portland. I think we all have to be very cautious about these ghost kitchens and the impact that Grubhub and Uber Eats and all these predatory companies are having on local businesses. And I think that that's going to be a very key factor. It's also an opportune time for folks to recognize the vulnerability that our market has. And I think that there's going to be some folks that are going to try to take advantage of that aren't based in Portland and aren't true to our communities. And so I think that we just have to be kind of on the ball and aware of that, be able to recognize who they are, because it's a very sneaky situation, as anyway, as is out there, you know. So but this was, you know, obviously a tremendous conversation that can go on and on, but at this point I'm going to hand it off to Saul again, but thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
Someday I'll learn.
You're not alone, friend.
Every time. Ori, Ezra, Katie, thank you so much. Really grateful for your participation, grateful to learn with you, and grateful to offer different models of what's going on in the community. I've enjoyed all your spaces. Ezra as recently as this past weekend, Katie for a bar mitzvah about a year or two ago, and Ori, you know, you did ice cream sandwiches for my daughter's bat mitzvah, and you know, we share the same music love, so we're buds, even though you're a Mets fan. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Neve Shalom, the COVID-19 Outreach and Services, and our series sponsors, Richard Barker, Wealth Management Advisor, Barry and Carla Benson, First Republic Bank, Gewurz Menashe, Portland State University, Jonathan Singer of Barg Singer PC, the Jerry and Helen Stern Grandchildren's Fund of OJCF, Stuart Gordon Strauss Architect BC, and Turner Construction Company. On April 18th, 2021, which is exactly 1 month from today, it is the MJCC, the Walk for the MJCC. I have included a link in the chat where you can make a donation if you'd like to make a donation to the walk. We are putting together teams of walkers, and with Passover coming up, I will mention that if you, you know, how did we leave the desert? We walked. So this is a way that you can support the JCC, and we are grateful for your support. May 12th, 2020 will be our MJCC virtual celebration, and we will be honoring Arlene Schnitzer of blessed memory. And we are still working on an event for April, but I can definitely tell you that on May 20th, 2021, we will be discussing the Oregon beer business starting at noon, moderated by Sonia Marie Lycum from Lycum Brewery and the OJCF, with panelists Ben Edmonds, founder of Breakside Brewery, Christine LaRue, executive director of the Oregon Brewers Guild, and Brian Yeager, author of Oregon Breweries, Red, White, and Brew, and creator of the Baker's Dozen and Stout Donuts and Stout Festival, which is a good one. Grateful for everyone being here. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you either in April or here at the J sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
y'all.